Parce que maintenant, c'est enregistré. Tout ce qu'il y a dans les microphones sont enregistrés. Okay.
Nice.
You can put it here. So yeah, I heard you speak French. I'm French Canadian. Oh, good. Yeah. There we go.
Mirko.
Did I create
I did not congratulate you since you were in the meeting. I can do it during the session. Yeah. No, I will. I'm just informing you. So you will not be surprised.
Yes, but otherwise I can give it to you on the stick if you don't have it.
second one? Second one. Second one. Yeah.
Yeah. So she says like that. We could just initiate the PowerPoint, the first one that's going to happen, and then go into the settings. So the first panelist.
Going because just their age. The young one very regularly.
Okay, you are. Oh, okay.
She's in Washington.
So are you replacing? Are you helping?
No.
Okay.
Just holding me up.
Okay, so we normally ask our community organizers to take care of the PowerPoint.
Okay.
But I'm initiating the podcast. Okay, so first panelist, do you know which one? Or I can open whichever.
Yeah, we're hearing.
You know what? This open so that I can just use the settings.
Yeah, good. Actually, I think it's a good idea.
Everything okay here?
Yeah, everything's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. We just had it
Very
through
well.
CR and now we're going to start the live broadcast.
Okay.
Check it in 2 minutes. Dankeschön.
That time of the day. Have a few.
Yeah, we had a presentation in Malachi.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Berlin, I come back.
So, we wait until we are complete, or I think it's probably best to do, or we are quite good. Okay, 6 chairs. Yeah. Okay, now we have. So, Spencer will have your presentation. Oh, okay.
This is it, it's right on that, no. That's it, the item on my desk. My desk.
Hi, how are you? Do you want to put down Nice to meet you.
Yeah, that's it.
That's going to be supporting me. I love that. I'll send it in. I wasn't talking today.
Yes.
We're starting just a minute. What do you They are confirmed.
Thank you. So you're a presenter. You're a
Just give us
presenter.
a short welcome note.
Okay.
Just not so short.
Good evening and welcome to Bonn, to the Bonn conference room. The Adaptation Fund is pleased to host this important event during this conference in Bonn to help accelerate the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Adaptation is a critical element of the Paris Agreement, and the Adaptation Fund supports vulnerable countries adapt to climate change. And this is done since its beginning, almost 10 years ago, continuously and growing. At its March meeting, the Adaptation Fund board approved a record of more than $60 million in new project funding, including the fund's first project under its regional program. This project will help vulnerable farmers across the East African countries build climate resilience. The fund has now committed $417 million in 65 countries, with more than 5.3 million direct beneficiaries. This followed positive results at COP22 in Morocco, where the fund surpassed its $80 million resource mobilization goal of 2016 through generous contributions from Germany, Sweden, Italy, and the Belgian regions of Brussels, Flanders, and Wallonia. COP22 in Marrakesh also decided that the Adaptation Fund should serve the Paris Agreement, following decisions to be taken at COP24 in 2018. This marked significant progress in the fund's roadmap to serving the agreement. Marrakesh also asked the APA to carry out the necessary preparatory work to address the fund's governance, institutional arrangements, safeguards, and operating modalities in order to serve the agreement. So following on that, countries, observers, and stakeholders submitted comments, and they are just being considered by SBI bodies. These excellent results from Marrakesh signal that countries are recognizing the fund's critical value in pioneering climate finance modalities like direct access and innovating concrete localized adaptation projects that can later be scaled up with larger resources. This is already happening in several places, like Pakistan, the Maldives, and Senegal. The Adaptation Fund contributes critical elements to the climate finance landscape and serves as a model for other climate funds. Direct access in the Adaptation Fund continues to grow. The fund is instrumental in building up national capacities in line with the principle of country ownership. Therefore, we have a robust readiness program that helps guide national entities through the accreditation and project development processes. We are proud that we could, in November, accredit a national implementing entity in Armenia as the first Eastern Europe entity under direct access. The fund has now more than 25 national implementing entities and more to follow, with 40% in least developed countries and small island developing states. Another 18 regional and multilateral entities that can deliver adaptation projects across the globe. Reflecting the fund's gender policy and action plan, approved last year, many components of its projects are already producing effective adaptation results and providing equal access to fund resources and opportunities for women and men. Furthermore, the fund got excellent marks recently for its environmental and social policy from the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights related to the environment. The Special Rapporteur concluded that the new mechanism established in Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement should follow the example of the Adaptation Fund, a mechanism that has already adopted strong safeguards. The fund's environmental and social policy was singled out as having strong, transparent safeguards in its projects and principles that promote human rights and gender equity while protecting marginalized groups and natural habitats. The fund continues to receive high demand for projects from vulnerable countries, with a total of 54 proposals received over the last 2 board meetings. An overall evaluation of the fund is also in process, which follows the first stage evaluation that found that the Adaptation Fund to be a great value, effective, efficient, and relevant, and an innovative learning institution that shares knowledge of its successes and challenges. There's growing momentum for the fund's inclusion in the Paris Agreement and to harness a diverse range of funding sources to help more vulnerable countries and communities to meet urgent adaptation needs. This year, the fund will, at the COP23 in Bonn, commemorate its 10th anniversary to mark its pioneering innovations in climate finance and concrete adaptation actions. Now, coming to the event this evening, we are pleased to showcase some of these successes today, where countries are building their adaptive capacities through direct access. We are honored to have speakers from our accredited national implementing entities from Antigua and Barbuda, Morocco, and South Africa to discuss direct access and enhanced direct access, which is another innovation of the fund, and positive impact on beneficiaries. The board just approved a $10 million US project to build community resilience in Antigua and Barbuda, so this is particularly timely. We are further pleased to have NGO representatives speak on the important role of civil society in both enhancing and raising awareness for the Adaptation Fund project. And with that, I'd like to start by introducing the new manager of the Adaptation Fund, Mr. Mikko Ollikainen, who will provide an overview of the fund and its value in enhancing implementation of the Paris Agreement. Thank you. You have the word.
Thank you very much, Chair. And good evening, everyone. Since we started a bit late, and in order to give more time to the speakers from the implementing entities, I'm going to shorten my presentation a little bit. But in general, I'm going to talk about the work of the fund and how it is already serving the Paris Agreement, in fact. Next slide, please. And next. Just very briefly about the Adaptation Fund, though most of you may know it already. It's an innovative fund that is turning 10 years this year. It is governed by a board that consists majority of developing country representatives, which is a unique feature of the fund. It was set up to be primarily funded by an international levy on clean development mechanism proceeds, the certified emission reduction units, and secondarily from other sources of funding. And thirdly, it's the first fund that offers direct access to its resources to developing countries. Next slide. Since its inception, the fund has mobilized over $630 million, and it has allocated out of this amount so far $417 million in 65 countries, of which 24 are least developed countries and 14 are small island developing states. There are currently 63 concrete localized adaptation projects that reach 5.4 million beneficiaries. This is the map of the projects that we are financing. The orange dots are concrete adaptation projects, and the blue ones are readiness-related projects. Next slide, please. The original main source of revenue for the fund were the CR units. As many of you know, the price of carbon crashed in 2011 and 2012, and since that, contributions from developed countries have been the main source of revenue. The Adaptation Fund board has followed a resource mobilization strategy and set the goal at around $80 million each year, and the strategy has either almost met or reached its targets in the recent years, which we are very, very happy of course. There is a very high demand for funding from the Adaptation Fund. The active pipeline of projects as of today is about $200 million. That is projects that are under development but not yet funded. This is just to show that the unique feature, the direct access national implementing entities, they at the moment, as the chair mentioned, cover 25 countries, and they represent very different types of countries in different parts of the world. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to quickly give an update on recent developments in the fund. Firstly, while direct access, and you will hear more from the next speakers, is a great opportunity for developing countries, it is not necessarily easy to reach the accreditation. And because of that, the Adaptation Fund board launched a readiness program in 2014, and that has helped some countries in understanding the requirements of accreditation better and in getting accredited. Next slide, please. One of the changes that the board has made to make it easier for especially smaller entities, typically from smaller countries, to achieve accreditation is a streamlined accreditation process. It does not mean that the standards themselves are lowered, but the way in which the entity shows their compliance is made more flexible. And since this modality was started 2 years ago, there have been 3 agencies that have been accredited using it, including in Micronesia, Cook Islands, and most recently in Armenia. The fund indeed has very high environmental and social safeguards systems. Those have been in place for 2.5 years now. They were complemented by a gender policy last year, and this is meant not only to ensure that that women and other vulnerable gender groups are not discriminated against, but also that the projects are designed in a way as to be most efficient in taking those considerations into account and to produce results that take the specific needs of women and men into account. The next slide, please. One of the new developments since 2 years ago is that the Adaptation Fund has also started financing projects regionally. That means multi-country projects. Until that, the fund had only financed the single country projects. And these cover themes such as food security, disaster risk reduction, early warning systems, transboundary water management, and innovation in adaptation finance. Since this was opened 2 years ago, there was huge demand, huge interest in these types of projects that enable collaboration between developing countries. And we received proposals totaling about $130 million for this type of projects alone. In October of last year, the board decided that since there is clear demand for this kind of projects, they expanded it from the initial pilot phase and to be a regular part of the fund's operations. And the first regional project was approved just 2 months ago. The board is also looking forward, and they've started work on medium-term strategy. This is to be based on the goals of the Article 7 of the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goal 13.1. It's going to be developed. It's being developed through a stepwise process in which a framework and some elements have been approved already. And during this year, there will be the actual development of the strategy, which will be done through an open process in which stakeholders can participate. Now, finally, about the Adaptation Fund serving the Paris Agreement. The fund has received quite high remarks in for its relevance and effectiveness and efficiency from the first phase of independent evaluation that was done 2 years ago. We're just starting the second phase of the evaluation that will look into the project and program outcomes that the fund is achieving. That is coinciding with the third review of the Adaptation Fund that has been discussed, for example, here during this week, and that will be finalized during this year. When the Paris Agreement was made in 2015, the parties agreed that the Adaptation Fund may serve the Paris Agreement subject to other decisions to be taken. And already that decision established a roadmap that would be followed so that the fund could serve the Paris Agreement formally. Last year in Marrakesh, parties took further decisions and decided that the Adaptation Fund should serve the Paris Agreement. And in order to that to take place, certain issues should be addressed, which include governance and institutional arrangements, safeguards, and operating modalities of the fund. And those are also discussions that are going on at the ad hoc working group on the Paris Agreement in this very meeting. The next slide, please. Now, as it was mentioned already, the fund's own perspective is that it's already serving the goals of the Paris Agreement. It's helping to enhance adaptive capacity and strengthen resilience in countries, and it's helping to fill the funding gap that exists for adaptation. And it's doing this with very functioning and efficient systems, and these systems are certainly ones that can be built upon, and so that the role of the fund can be formalized in serving the agreement. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mikko. I'd suggest that we first hear the presentations and then have a complete discussion after it, because otherwise we might get into trouble with the time. Now we are getting into the real work on the ground. I'd like to introduce Ms. Ruth Spencer from the Department of Environment in Antigua and Barbuda. It's a national implementing entity of the fund, and your presentation is going into communities and ecosystems adapting to extreme rainfall.
Okay. I'd like to stand. I don't feel good sitting.
Yeah.
Do I have to hold this? My voice is okay. Thank you. It's good to be here with you today. The national focal point, Ambassador Diane Blacklane, could not come to the meeting, and so she asked me to fill in. I am not employed by the government of Antigua. I represent NGO Hub, and because of that, I'm a member of the TAC. We have a system in Antigua that's mandated by law that no policy, no program is passed without the input of our local community groups and NGOs. So as an NGO facility, I sit on the TAC. I understand all the programs and projects that are coming to the island, and I'm able to have input into it. Antigua is an island of about 89,000 persons, 108 square miles. We are the first Caribbean government to have been accredited, and we are very happy to have these funds because it's going to do wonders for us in one of our flooded communities that's always flooding. So these are the statistics. We were accredited in August 2015, and we got the approval in March 2017. The project is going to be dealing a lot with flooding issues, which means the pipelines, there's no infrastructure, there's no pipelines to carry away the water when it floods. So water works will be done. There will also be a revolving loan program, the first of its type for local communities. These are people who are not bankable, who fear going into a commercial bank because they fear rejection. And so even though their houses need to be climate proofed, even though these houses are in waterways, you know, really bad condition, what was the solution? The solution is this revolving loan fund that will provide financing for them to put their house on heights. Many times the land is not owned by them, so they cannot put no concrete structures, but they'll be able to at least put pillars. They'll be able to have water supply in place, whether it's digging a cistern or putting some water tanks. They'll be able to put mesh on the windows. Because of the flooding, we have lots of mosquito problems. Also, installation of solar panels for electricity is also envisaged because the country has one of the highest electricity costs in the world, 50 cents US a kilowatt. So you can imagine what happens when somebody gets their little paycheck, over half of it goes to pay electricity bills. And once you get cut off, you know, to get back onto the grid is very hard. So as you can see, this fund is going to do wonders in our communities. Also, community shelter will be built. Why a community shelter? Because in that particular community, you have a lot of disabled persons. You have seniors. The houses are not in no good condition. So anytime you hear a heavy rain is coming or a hurricane, the National Office of Disaster Services has to go to that community and move the people out. But where do you put them? You put them in a church, maybe, that maybe has no running water, no facilities to cook. Electricity is going to come off because once hurricane is coming, the power is taken off. So you can imagine the situation. Even though it's a hurricane shelter, it's not up to par. And so these hurricane shelters will also be climate proofed. Can you change? Okay, so this is a diagram telling you how the revolving fund program works. The Department of Environment is the accredited agency. It has a board. In our laws, they say it's mandated for the local communities, but also enshrined in the law is a sustainable financing mechanism. So all the grant funds that comes into the Department of Environment there's an allocation of 15% for the local community groups for their projects and programs. We do get bits and pieces of donor funding, but it's never enough. You know, it's small pieces here and there, but this fund is mandated by law to provide 15% to the groups. So the revolving loan program comes under this. It's going to be implemented in line with the Ministry of Finance guidelines. It's not going through a commercial bank. They have already instituted a student loan program. So a system is in place for collection of the payments. And the interest rate is like 2%, which is just to cover the operational costs. It's not a money-making mechanism. But having it as a revolving loan so that these families can, as I said, get their water systems, put the houses on pillars. You see what? You see a waterway there? Heavy rains, that's going to come up. So that system is somebody who is renting a piece of land, and all they can do is to put those pillars. They cannot put a concrete structure in place. So you spout the roof so that your water container can have water. If you own the land, you can build a system. So the revolving loan fund is envisaged to ensure that these low-income persons who would be rejected by the bank can have a source of finance. It's grant fundings being used as a loan, as I said, so that it can continue to, the repayments continue to multiply the fund. And I have some statistics there. Okay, can you go to the next slide? So the key development inputs. Before we started the project, and the project is done through a multi-stakeholder approach. It's not just the Department of Environment, it's the NGOs, the community people. We do house to house to the village because we want to see what exists in the community. We want to meet with the people to tell them about the project. As you would expect, sometimes people get a little turned off because time after time people go to communities and make promises, right? And community groups don't see anything other people. So sometimes they get turned off. What is this about now? So we used the house approach and we went to the families, and most of these homes are headed by women with single children, and the houses are in bad state. When we started going through, we saw some houses that none of you would like to live in. And because of that, we did a video. And we did about 30 homes for disabled persons. They were really bad, but we had to get the message out. These people can no longer be invisible. And it went on the TV. And when the Prime Minister saw it, he pledged immediately a large sum of money so that the disabled persons can have their houses repaired. These are people, they have families, but we are the family members. These are people who have been in accidents, but something has happened to them and they can't continue their normal way of life. And they're basically, we don't have a social service like you countries in Norway and these other countries where these people are assured a sum of money. They may get a little food package or something, but a major income to carry on doesn't work. So that was one thing that came out of the house to house, just going house to house. We saw some houses that weren't fit for people to live in, so we made a video, and that's. Also community meetings. After we went to people, we got their telephone numbers, we informed them about the project that we were hoping to come on stream. We were doing the, getting the baseline data. Then we called them to meetings and we began to ask them how they felt about having access to finance. And yes, they all wanted it. Some said, my income is small, I don't know if I can pay. But one thing I found out with poor people, they have pride and they'll pay back the loan. A couple of years ago, Barclays Bank in Antigua, they had a fund for farmers. And the farmers weren't going in. Why weren't they going in? People don't like to be turned down. It does something to your pride. And Barclays handed over those funds to an NGO group to execute. And the farmers felt comfortable with local ordinary people relating to them, and that's how they think. But going into a big commercial bank where they're asking you for business plans and cash flow projections, you know, they don't know how to do it, so they ain't gonna go. That's, you know, you put yourself in their places. And so now with this project, by having so many NGOs on the board as stakeholders to this project, we're able to build in the local knowledge. Because the people were able to tell us exactly what happened years ago. Somebody said, a pond used to be there now, but no, for some reason it was filled up. So many changes have taken place in the community. And when the flooding started, it started at one point and the gush of the water come down on the community and it stays there, stagnant water. It's not flowing. And so, you know, these people are impacted by that. They have children and you know how it is. Okay, let's go on. So one of the first things that was a requirement for the project to get the data, we did a survey. This survey involved a lot of school leavers and students coming home in the holidays for holidays. So they were first year university students and they went out throughout the project area and came up with the information. So you see the kind of climate problem that was faced by the household. Inconsistent water, which means even though we have extreme rain at times, we are a dry country. Right now we are going into a 3-year drought. I have to buy water all the time. I have a lot of cisterns, but my cisterns are empty because I've been going through for months and months, not having any water, so I have to buy water right now. Stagnant water in drains, hurricanes, flooding. That's our water cycle. Can you move on, please? Okay, so these loans that I told you we went to talk to the community about, there's a high demand for them. So we surveyed 2,500 homes, 951 loans. Why the rest don't want? The rest are probably retired or elderly people on some kind of pension, and by law you can't take the income from a pensioner. And you have some that just below the poverty line. So who can get loans will get loans. The rest will probably have to use some kind of the grant financing to repair the homes, like the disabled, the elderly, the blind, the shut-ins. That's the plan. Can you go on? Okay, so we did a financial analysis, and the goal is to serve the female-headed households, and most of the houses are headed by females. And the interest rate, as I said, is 2 to 4. The average interest rate in a bank is between 8 and 11%. So as I said, the little interest is just to cover operational costs. We probably will have a small percentage of write-offs, and we put it as 2.5%, and flexible payback up to 10 years. So these loans are going to be unsecured. They don't have no security to bring anyway. And it's really vulnerable and marginalized people that live in this community. If they could have done better, they would have done better. They would have repaired their houses, but they're just left like that. So the financial model is suggesting that 5.8 million in additional loans can be created once the people pay back. And the files revolves down and needs replenishing through sustainable grants. Next, please. So these are the project guiding principles. Gender equality, you know, it's a term used a lot, but we really make sure it works in our countries. Climate justice. Justice because you're giving this community the opportunity to live a normal life like me and you, instead of just living in a situation of stagnant water with mosquitoes, and the government doesn't have a budget to deal with it. You know, they have no pipelines, as I said. So now by putting in pipes, and so the water will be able to flow where it normally does. Sustainability, why is it sustainable? Because the amount of stakeholders that we have involved, the Adaptation Fund, I don't know if all your money can meet all the needs, but we have our groups, we have our churches, our local NGOs. Everybody's contributing to the process. You would believe you need okay, one thing I found out from going to some of these meetings, I don't know why governments are so scared or threatened of having local communities on their team. These people bring a wealth of information and knowledge. In our country, you need a drawing done. Somebody in the faith-based community, the private sector is going to say, I'll contribute that. You need other services and skills. They were there. Our Department of Environment is very dynamic, but it has limited human resources. They cannot do everything. But when you bring the partners on board, the churches, you get so much done. So that's how Antigua is always ahead, because all the groups are contributing to the process. Everybody's committed. It's like local ownership. You know, you want to see things done in your country, bring everybody on board, and that's how we do it in Antigua, and we have access to finance. I think I'm done, right? And that's Ambassador Diane Blacklade, and we had a little party when we got accredited. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. That was really illustrative and an insight how concrete and how you're really working with the people and you meet the demands of vulnerable groups. That's really good example. Thank you. I'd like to carry on with a presentation from Morocco. Ms. Miriam Andalusi, she's the head of the Environment Service of the Agency for Agricultural Development, ADA, which is also a national implementing entity. So you have the floor, please.
Thank you. So, dear colleagues, I'm very pleased to be with you in this event and to share with you the modest experience of Morocco on direct access to climate finance. So before to start, I want to congratulate my friend and my colleague Miko for his nomination as the manager of the Adaptation Fund, and wishing him all the success. So let me introduce firstly the ADA organization and give you a brief idea on the role played by our agency. Our agency, ADA, or Agricultural Development Agency, was established within the framework of Morocco, of the Moroccan Green Plan that was launched in 2008 as an ambitious strategy with the goal to build the agriculture sector as a real level for socio-economic development and resilience threatening to climate change. For this purpose, our agency is a public institution within the Ministry of Agriculture and is responsible for proposing the governmental authorities' action plan. Besides its initial missions, our agency owned another ones by its accreditation on November 2012. And with the approval of its first project by the Adaptation Fund, which is focused in the Oasis area. Oasis area in Morocco, which constitutes 30% of the national territory and are considered as a last barrier against desertification. They constitute unique natural landscapes and the agriculture mining resources. So the project focused on the two basins. The first one is an area located in the immediate part of catchment where water resources can still be mobilized for saving the palm groves with the potential for agricultural production. And the second one, Maider Basin, is an area located downstream of catchments where the availability of water resources must be protected to ensure the preservation of the drinking water supply. So the project, the Adaptation to Climate Change project in Oasis area aims to strengthen the adaptive capacity of Oasis population and reduce the Oasis agro-ecosystem vulnerability to climate change by increasing resilience to the target ecosystem and by disseminating knowledge management. Action include improved management of soil and water resources, as well as the use of resistance varieties of palm trees and the training station for the stakeholders. And this is through 5 campments. So let me share with you the achievement for our projects for the first year of its implementation. Regarding the first comment related to the improvement of joint regulation of groundwater and surface water through new sustainable hydraulic and protective structure, we have the installation of the follow-up equipment for piezometers. The piezometers is a device used to measure a liquid level in a system by measuring the heights to which a clump of the liquid rise against gravity, or device which measure the pressure of groundwater at specific points. Here we carry out an exploration for study through drilling for deep water resources. We had proceeded also to the restoration of new protective structure as Khatara. The Khatara is an ancestral irrigation system consisting of a tunnel dug at very slight upward gradient into rising ground, so that water from deep within the earth runs out to the surface. Khatara were developed in the oases, in Moroccan oases, for 1,000 years. And the project aims to restore this ancestral system. The Segia also. We proceed also to regular monitoring of the groundwater level by the analysis and the monitoring of data received from the piezometers. For the second comment, related to diversifying income resources and improving the living condition of population vulnerable to climate change in the target area, in the profit of beneficiaries, especially women and the youth people. We have developed some activities for women, as women cooperatives, handcraft and non-agriculture activities, to help to increase the resilience of the oasis population and improve their stability on this area. The fourth comment is related to the improving stakeholders' awareness through the management and exchange of knowledge. And the fifth comment is related to strengthening the capacities of participants in the design of implementation of adaptation measure. And here we have the total numbers of officials or participants who have benefited from the training sessions. So as I had already said in the previous side event of the Adaptation Fund, the adaptation project funded entirely by the Adaptation Fund ensure the realization of all activities of the project without the risk of non-availability of funds. In addition, the direct access allows to the NIEs to implement their project through national procedures instead of adopting new procedures required by other agencies that might seem complicated. And also, following our accreditation with the Adaptation Fund, we were able to gain the JCF accreditation through the fast-track process, which enabled us to grow up the rapid process. And personally, I consider that the Adaptation Fund is my first school or university on direct access to climate finance. So at the end, let me take the opportunity to thank very much the Adaptation Fund, the team, for the valuable support. And I want to tell you that just days before coming here to Bonn, I visited the project area where I met the beneficiaries, and I'm delighted to share with you their warm thanks and the deep gratitude to every single person who contributed in a way or in another for contributing to improve the livelihood of the population and to ensure the stability of this community. So I promised them to share with you their thanks, as well as I can do with my modest and limited English. So on behalf of this community, I would like to thank you once again, and to thank the Adaptation Fund, the contributors who continue to support this fund, and all the negotiators advocating to maintain this fund alive. Personally, I have always believed in this fund, and I will continue to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miriam. I think this is a very good message, and thank you also for the gratitude from the beneficiaries. I mean, you mentioned that you were learning a lot from this accreditation process, but I think we also are a learning institution at the fund, and it's good to see how that works, how different models work, and that country ownership is really so important that you do your own procedures, and we might take that forward in other projects. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now I have a last national implementing entity from South Africa. Let me introduce Ms. Mandy Barnett. She's a project director from the South African National Biodiversity Institute, SANBI. So you have the floor, Mandy, please.
Good evening, everybody. It's a great privilege to be able to address you today. I'm also a great fan of the Adaptation Fund, and I hope today to be able to take you on our journey with the Adaptation Fund. SANBI, the institute that I work for, is the national implementing entity of the Adaptation Fund and also an accredited entity of the Green Climate Fund. And it's because of the Adaptation Fund that we have achieved our Green Climate Fund accreditation. So I really want to make that remark right at the outset around how the Adaptation Fund provides a very important stepping stone for agencies to build the capacity to do this work in climate finance. So not only are we an entity of both funds, we were also the pioneer of enhanced direct access in the Adaptation Fund. And today I want to tell you a little bit about the story of enhanced direct access, where it came from, what the project is about, and some of our insights and lessons. As NIE for the Adaptation Fund, SANBI is implementing 2 projects. The one on the right is a $7.5 million project in a catchment in South Africa. And the one on the left is our small grants facility, which is our enhanced direct access project. And what does enhanced direct access mean? It means that instead of the project being approved with all of the activities designed, the national entity is able to design project activities after the project has been approved. So what that means for us is that we have a project that's approved for a small grants facility, and we only decide what the projects will be during the project development and implementation process. EDA came about because when we first started to develop our projects, we consulted with stakeholders who said to us, what do you mean direct access when it's millions of dollars going to government, right? Direct access means when you give us money to do the things that we think are important. And from that came the idea of a small grants facility, and EDA was born. The project itself is a $2.5 million project. It seeks to support 12 grants in 2 areas in South Africa of about $1 million each. It's run by a local or an NGO called South South North, and it's executed in collaboration with 2 other NGOs, Choice Trust and Conservation South Africa, who provide a local facilitating role, and also very importantly by the local municipalities in the areas where the projects are to be taking place. The process to date has been a long one. So October 2016, we started, adverts, capacity building, concept, note review, proposal solicitation, detailed review, contracting, etc. And none of this is a straight line. We go around in circles all the time with this process. It's been a very difficult process overall in the small grant facility. We greatly underestimated how much capacity there was on the ground. We thought there were many more organizations who would meet our project criteria. And we also thought that many organizations in the development space would identify themselves as being able to implement climate change adaptation programs. And that's not been the case. The result of that is that we've had to radically ratchet up the project development support to would-be grantees. We've had to change project application forms and processes. And I say all of this because it's a good thing, because what it means is that we're learning. And through the learning, we hope to be able to understand how to scale this program of work up in South Africa, but also how it could be rolled out in other developing countries with similar contexts. It's not all bad. The high-level progress to date is that 9 of the 12 projects have been approved, 4 have been contracted out and are in advanced stages of implementation. There's a range of interventions, raising climate resilient livestock, producing climate resilient tea, etc. And all of the photographs that you've been seeing are of project beneficiaries who are recipients of the actual small grant investments. 2,931 direct project beneficiaries have already been identified as part of the process to date. So quite a big impact with quite a lot of work to get there. What has the Adaptation Fund's enhanced direct access process enabled? Well, first of all, EDA has significantly increased country ownership of the climate change agenda in South Africa, and it has strengthened governance for climate change finance in South Africa at multiple levels, because the project is governed nationally and locally, and decision-making is happening at both of those levels. And in order for those levels to be able to engage in decision-making about the project, they need to be able to understand what climate change adaptation is. Interestingly, it's also become recognized, EDA, as a modality for climate finance, and the GCF has issued a request for proposals for an enhanced direct access pilot that draws directly from the experiences of the Adaptation Fund. And happily, and I'm not even sure if the Adaptation Fund knows this, but SANBI is in the process of developing a $10 million GCF small grant facility project. The concept's been approved by the GCF, and this builds explicitly on our work with the Adaptation Fund. So our take-home messages. First of all, adaptation is a local issue. And if we want to fully address it, nuanced and iterative local responses are needed. Secondly, we need to not be afraid to step into the fire and stay there. These processes are difficult. And as we figure out how to address the challenges, we learn how to make a lasting impact in vulnerable communities who need these interventions most. And finally, of course, I have to say thank you to the Adaptation Fund, because without the Adaptation Fund, we would not be able to do the work that we do in the climate finance space. For sure, we would not be accredited as an agency with the Green Climate Fund. And we're very grateful for all the support the Adaptation Fund's given us. And we hope, as I said in the beginning, that the stepping stones that we have followed in terms of moving from accreditation with the Adaptation Fund to the GCF will be something that other NIEs are able to achieve as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mandy. I think another good example, on the one hand, to see how good it works, the collaboration between the Adaptation Fund and the GCF, so that both institutions work well together. And that, I mean, direct access and scaling up are like the catchwords here, which is a good example how this has been put into practice. And also, I think this direct access, enhanced direct access modality is showing that, I mean, flexibility is needed for project implementation, and also trust in the institutions on the ground, that, I mean, they know best what's good for the people there. So thank you, Mandy. And that's now the point to come to the last presentation, now the view from the civil society. I'd like to give the floor to Jean-Paul Prisafana from the Adaptation Fund NGO Network. He's a policy advisor on climate finance and development.
So thank you very much. I will rename myself. I'm Emmanuel Sek, Program Manager at ENDA. ENDA is based in Senegal. So I will join my voice to those who already congratulate Mirko for his nomination as a new manager of the Adaptation Fund Secretariat. So I'm talking on behalf of Adaptation Fund NGOs Network to show some impact related to what we are doing on the ground, particularly in the countries. So the Adaptation Fund NGOs network is a coalition of more than 200 civil society organizations, and there are 10 of them who are support to follow the project within the countries. And then you could see in the map where we are in almost all regions. So there is one dot missing in Europe. It is Germanwatch who is coordinating this network. Then you could see that in Latin America, we are in 2 countries at least, Jamaica and Honduras. So in Africa, we are in 6 countries, Benin, Senegal, Rwanda, South Africa, Tanzania, Kenya. And in Asia, we are in Jordan and also in Cambodia. So then we will see that the map of the different logo who are members of the support members of the organization. So mainly in general, so the CSOs are working to improve the CSOs' participation in the implementation of the project funded by the Adaptation Fund, and in the other hand, to increase the ownership of this project by communities, because for us it is important for the sustainability of the project funded through the Adaptation Fund, and also to watch for the achievement of this project objectives. Because if you look at what the allocation of resources, we come with the clean development mechanism, the 2% of the clean mechanism development that was targeting communities who are affected by the climate change. So, and then also to support and train where it is needed and advise stakeholders for the implementation of the activities. Then we will see with this illustration, the activities we are doing at the regional level and at the national level. I will use just to illustrate what I was saying, 3 countries. One in Africa, which is Senegal, and with ENDA, where we work with communities, we work also with NIEs, beneficiaries, and local authorities for them to take ownership of the project. We support also the executing entities in implementing the project and collaborate closely with the NIE and then the National Directorate of Environment. And also we made the follow-up of the project to be sure that the implementation meet the expectation, and also have meeting interview with community related to the project. So we advocate also for the scaling of the coastal adaptation strategy, because in Senegal, we say that, yes, we had a pilot project, and it is important that we have at least a national responses related to the coastal erosion. Then we have partnership with community, because communities have to understand well the adaptation to climate change, and then we contribute to increase the awareness related to that. So for this project finance in Senegal related to the coastal erosion, we have made studies related to the impact, to know what are the social impact, the environmental impact, and also the economical impact. And I think we already shared the studies with the Adaptation Fund. So what the photo you are seeing here was after the rehabilitation of the anti-salt dike. So before the anti-salt dike, so the land was salinized, so it was degraded land. So now women can grow rice after the building of the anti-salt dike. Then we observe the environmental impact related to the adaptation strategy. So the second one is related to a case in Asia, Jordan, where we have the Royal Marine Conservation Society of Jordan, which is also doing almost the same activities than we did in Senegal, with consultation with communities and also beneficiaries. And what is the added value here for them is that at least they are member of the steering committee. That means that they can feed the process by their vote and also advise if needed. And then they ensure also that communities are also part of this process at the national level. So the third one is related to the Honduras. Honduras is in Latin America with Foundation for Vida. So they are supporting the role of civil society in the Adaptation Fund project. They have made a lot of communication and awareness raising. If you assess at the community level in many parts where the Adaptation Fund were implemented, people will let you know that they know what about adaptation on climate change. And I think that it is an impact when people come to understand the issue of adaptation and particularly on climate change, beside what they know on environment. So they identify and also contribute to synergy between stakeholders, I mean government, beneficiaries, university, because research also is very, very important in this process, and NGOs, and articulate and generate knowledge and evidence related to these issues. So you will see with the picture the events that the Adaptation Fund have organized during with the Adaptation Fund NGOs network during the COP in Marrakesh. So what the network have achieved, so we can say that yes, we are widening the network. As we said, we have more than 200 civil society organizations, so that are member of this, working on climate resilience, working on adaptation. So there is a special attention to the needs of the communities, because this is important in the process. We enhance also cooperation, working with Adaptation Fund board. As you may know, we have some interactive dialogue with the member of the board, where we provide feedback on what happened in the field. And I think that this gives them more knowledge of the achievement within the project that are funded under this mechanism. So then there is stakeholder involvement in the project in different countries, and we think that for the sustainability of the project, there is a need for communities, there is a need for stakeholders to take ownership of that, and we are working for the operationalization of some principle like transparency and good governance. As some people have said previously, when we had this direct access and the NIEs, many countries was using the multilateral implementing entities. And we as civil society, we advocate at least for countries to do an effort to build their institutional capacities and promote the NIEs. And now we know that there is a need with the Green Climate Fund to go with this national institution. So we continue pushing on that for countries to go for NIEs, because they will contribute not only to build their human or technical capacities, but also to contribute in better governance of resources they got through the climate change process. You could find more information through this website. We have made a lot of publication related to the Adaptation Fund, and even the modalities and procedure to access to the funds, and also related to the implementing entity. So in different regions, we are trying to set up some regional hub to have a critical mass of CSOs joining this process at the international and even at the national and the regional level. So I thank you very much on behalf of the Adaptation Fund and NGOs Network.
Thank you, Emmanuel. And yeah, I think it's also good to know that you're growing, the network is growing, and that your input really at the Adaptation Fund board meetings is so welcome, and also I only can invite the network and new NGOs joining to comment also on the projects under development and also on the broader policies we're doing in the fund. So now we have room for questions and also for discussions. I think we have to leave by 8 o'clock, but I invite all of you, please to put any questions if anything was unclear, or if you want to, and it would be good if you first give your name and that we know whom to respond. So you have, you get a catch box.
Good throw. Hello. My name is Shamail Al-Sharik. I'm from the Kuwait delegation. And I had a question to Miko, I believe. You said that one of the challenges was resource mobilization and knowledge management. Why are they challenges in particular?
Thank you very much for the question. Indeed, these were two challenges that were identified in the first phase of the overall evaluation. For resource mobilization, the challenge is that the Adaptation Fund was set up to be funded mostly by these CRs, and CR price crashed, and there was no alternative mechanism really available. So the fund really relied on voluntary contributions from countries, and there was no mechanism set up for those. So those have been coming as countries are in a position to make a contribution to the fund. So far, we've been very lucky and, of course, very grateful for the contributions that we've received, but it's in a way, it's not a predictable source of funding for us. That needs to be said. In terms of knowledge management, at the time when the evaluation was done, the fund had just matured enough to have actually created some knowledge, but we didn't have processes in place to do a very good job in capturing those lessons learned. So in fact, the Adaptation Fund board has taken some steps after that, realizing that now we are a more mature fund. We have a lot of information that we can make available for other funds, for the wider public. And last year, the Adaptation Fund board approved a knowledge management strategy, an action plan, and we are in fact also just in the process of recruiting some additional staff to the secretariat. We're a very small team, but for the first time, we will now have a dedicated staff working for knowledge management, which will be helping us in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Miko. And maybe I can add on resource mobilization. At the last board meeting, we've decided to disclose the resource mobilization strategy that was adopted last year. So there's some editing going on, but it should soon be public on the internet, so you can look into that. And also maybe on the medium-term strategy, Miko was also mentioning in his presentation, knowledge management is also supposed to be one area for action in the medium-term strategy. So that as it is such an important thing to enhance learning, and we've seen it, I think, also from Emmanuel's presentation, that also the NGOs share knowledge and different projects share knowledge. There's a growing demand for adaptation funding, and I think the Adaptation Fund can contribute a lot on that. So are there other questions or comments? Yes, please.
Is here the yeah. Hi, I'm Marja Olf, Coordinator Europe of the Sean Babaji Missions, an international organization. I would like to request if you can say a little bit more about this scaling up in coordination with the Green Climate Fund.
Okay, I can try that. So coordination, so there are different discussions going on. There is in the negotiations or in the bodies under the convention, there's a standing committee on finance, where complementarity and interaction between funds is one of the tasks they're looking into. So you can, then there's also the Green Climate Fund has in its mandate, in its instrument, also the question of complementarity and coherence, I think it's called there, where they already have decided to have annual seminars on that. And I think in general, all the climate funds are interested in, using synergies, because the public money in the funds is scarce. If you look at the demands for adaptation and other and mitigation and other issues, and so it's very important that we work together and that there's no doubling. And we for instance, we have our different approaches, and the big Green Climate Fund is more doing transformational projects, bigger ones, and the Adaptation Fund is usually so we have a $10 million, let's say, limit for our projects, and it's more focused on vulnerable people directly affected. So and those different approaches must be complementary. And so one, I think, good example is that projects are taken up and scaled up by others. I think the Sanbi example was a very good on this point.
My name is Bachir Ghala from Mongolia. Mongolia, we're also implementing projects supported by the Adaptation Fund. But when you are coming to the local community, even local authority, sometimes it's very difficult to differ between projects supported by Adaptation Fund and project aimed at poverty elevation. And sometimes people are asking what difference between these projects and what kind of criteria we can use to show that this project just is coming, should be something related to the adaptation to climate change, how we can make difference at the local level, at the grassroots level.
Thank you for the question. And I was personally very lucky to see the Mongolia project last year. We occasionally get to see the projects, and it was great to see the good work that the local communities are doing in order to increase their own resilience with support of the technical agencies. When we get to the very community level, it's true that it's often not immediately very clear how this project that, for example, improves water management is different from a project that improves water management that doesn't consider the climate change adaptation. From our perspective, the differences become more evident when you look at these projects from the national perspective and how they help the country to meet their national adaptation priorities, and how those very concrete projects that we finance, how they are linked to the bigger picture and help governments showcase approaches to adaptation and building resilience, and how you can involve different kinds of stakeholders in doing that, and offering ways for scaling up. At the very community level, often it's linked to other activities related to climate change adaptation, such as awareness raising and development of capacities of local institutions. But it's true that when you go to the very local level, if you look at the dike or the irrigation system built by the project, it doesn't really always immediately differ from one built for an agricultural development project. But from our perspective, that's actually not such a very crucial concern. We should look at the bigger picture and how these benefit. Thank you.
Any more comments from the floor, or also from the panel, maybe?
Well, Antigua, everybody has already gone from Adaptation Fund to Green Climate Fund. We are on that path. We had a Skype meeting today, and I'm hoping at the July meeting, we will, succeed. But, we are a real small island, taking on some big challenges, but the ambassador is very visionary. She looks ahead and she knows the situation with governments. Governments do not have the budget. Even like we mentioned, our ecosystems. We are a small Caribbean island. We have things in the land affecting our marine sector, and there's so much work to do, but there's no budget for enforcement. So that's why we have to have the local communities. They are all rangers out in the community. When they see anything going wrong, they make a call, and we have to constantly empower them and, educate them and bring them on board so that they take everything serious with us.
Thank you. You got the floor, please. There must be some catch box. Ah, yeah, there it is.
My name is Eunice, and I'm a student in the Netherlands, but I come from Kenya. My question is, I see the mission is to help the most vulnerable communities in developing countries, but then I wonder if there's a country as a whole that is more vulnerable, but it's not able to access the funds because of maybe they don't have enough institutional capacity, or maybe they're not able to do the proposals that are required to get the funding. I don't know that if there's that kind of situation.
I like Sasha. Sasha is from Antigua, and if you can share how Antigua now is helping the other OECS countries to come on board. Sorry. Oh, this one.
Okay, yes. So my name is Sasha Gay Middleton from the Department of Environment in Antigua, and I'm also an NGO representative from the UNDP Small Grants Program National Steering Committee. We are currently in the phase of being accredited to the Green Climate Fund, and as Ruth mentioned before that, we're also accredited to the Adaptation Fund. And a part of it, one of our projects is going to be an enhanced direct access. So that's why I was so happy when I heard about South Africa's enhanced direct access. It was one of the key areas in which that we are trying to help our sister countries. So with us being accredited, we are now trying to have Grenada and Dominica and hopefully all the OECS countries to have direct access through the Department of Environment and the OECS Commission, as opposed to going through other regional agencies, because these agencies, they would require to program these funds through them, but they take at least 10% to 15%. And that's like literally taking all of our monies into something else as opposed to, helping the local community. I want to say that, as the accredited entity from South Africa, to continue doing what you're doing and help these sister islands or the countries, to elevate themselves. So since Antigua has that capacity, we made that commitment to assist other countries in the process of accreditation. Just a comment, I just want to say thank you to all the presenters. It was really, really good, informative, and I love the fact that you have community leaders, community NGOs, civil society organizations involved in the projects. This is very big, and it will definitely be a success part of your project. So thank you again.
Thank you. That almost could be my concluding remarks, but I just wanted to add, thank you very much. And it's very good to see how that really works in practice. I mean, that you're working together with sister countries. And I think from the Adaptation Fund side, I mean, there's the readiness program, and they also have in this offer, there's the possibility to share knowledge and to get this kind of grant finance to work with other institutions. So there's an openness, and it's good to hear that is working. So, Amico, sorry.
Sorry, but I should also clarify to the previous comment from or question from Jenis, because like Sasha mentioned, there is an option in addition to the direct access, in addition to national implementing entities, to use the services of multilateral and regional implementing entities. They may have some downsides, as was mentioned, for example, in terms of the overheads that are part of the question. But that alternative route was established especially with the weakest countries in mind, that or least developed countries in mind, that might have the highest challenges in having their own institution accredited. So that is not to, in order not to block access for those countries, but that is that's an alternative route. That's more, should I say, business as usual, because that has been done by other financing mechanisms already. But the unique or innovative feature in the Adaptation Fund has been direct access, which is for the first time offering countries to take that role by themselves. Thank you. Yes. Sorry, and like I quickly mentioned in the presentation, the board has taken some steps to make it easier for smaller entities to access resources by this streamlined accreditation process. So 3 countries have made use of that process already. And by the way, I should mention that because there are representatives of countries here, I have my colleague Silvia Mancini, who is coordinating the accreditation process here. So if you have any specific questions related to the accreditation process, she will be happy to answer. And my colleague Farai Madziwa, who is coordinating the readiness program, if you have any readiness related questions, he will be happy to answer. And if you have project related questions, Dauda Anjay and myself will be more than happy to answer you. So it's just to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have learned a lot. We had, I think, thanks again also for your, for the presentations, but also for your acknowledgement of the fund, which is, I think, really, it's good to hear that it's really making a difference. Yes, thank you. So having said this, I thank you all. Please have a nice evening and keep the Adaptation Fund in good memory. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.